Frank Batchelor, who's the town supervisor. Said, you know, we're planning on putting wind turbines in Meredith. And I thought, oh, you know, wind turbines sounds good to me.
We all need to do something for the environment.
Any alternative energy is something we have to consider, we need to pursue.
A couple of guys from Airtricity, big wind developer, knocked on the door.
I saw some turbines as I was driving on back roads, and I thought they were so beautiful. I just couldn't believe it.
We signed a lease to have a turbine up on our hill, at least one turbine.
So I learned all about turbines, and I was very, very excited.
And I thought that this would be a really good idea. We'd be doing our part to end the country's oil dependency.
Everything you pick up in the paper, or if you look at the TV, everything is about global warming.
And one of my friends was saying, you gotta look at this. The wind turbines are coming. And I'm like, wind turbines? What are you talking about? You know, that's good. That's a good thing.
We had John and Mary Hamilton over for brunch, and John says, oh, by the way, I'm thinking of putting a couple of windmills up on my property. We looked at him and said, oh, how nice.
We've lived with the wind. This whole time I've been farming, we've had to fight with it at times. And I look at that wind as it's here. Why aren't we using it? Why aren't we generating power with it? Our community has been a pretty cohesive town. I ran for supervisor of the town of Meredith in 1987, and I have served continuously since then. Actually, being supervisor really was easy for me, but the issue of the wind development, I guess I was naive. I never thought it would be so contentious an issue, and that's what it's turned out to be. So it's really divided our community. I didn't see it coming. I guess I should have. I moved up here in 1960, started with a dairy farm. We had a small herd when we started, 26 cows, and I built up to a herd of 105 milkers. I think everyone kind of convinced me that it was time to end the rigor of being there 24/7. Now we have a small beef herd of registered Black Angus cattle. I've actually been interested in wind energy development for a long time. We have a lot of land. We have a good hill. Airtricity was an Ireland-based company that had come out here and was interested in our farm and offered me a contract.
It was a freezing cold morning, and I was buying 3 young steers from my neighbor across the road, Frank Batchelor, who's the town supervisor.
Ken had recently moved up here from New York. He's a retired doctor from Brooklyn, selling grass-fed beef in the city.
So we went into his kitchen to have a cup of tea, and he got a call from a guy who was a supervisor in Madison County, and they were talking about wind development.
The town of Fenner had, I think, 20 wind turbines, which had been put up a couple of years ago. And I called him to get information.
And he was saying, well, the guy said you might have some problem if you're thinking about signing a contract on your own land, because there might be a conflict of interest. And he kind of just sort of shrugged and gave me this impish smile.
I guess that's where the trouble started.
I didn't think too much of it, and then I sort of went home and I started reading about what it meant, what wind turbines were, what the risks were, and I got really concerned about it.
Neighbors viewed me as town supervisor as having a conflict of interest. They had an attorney that contacted me and said, let me know that I should make full disclosure, and I did. I hadn't taken any money from the company, and I hadn't signed any contract with them. And so that's where we left it.
Basically, that was how the community found out about this, through me, you know, warming up in Frank's kitchen.
A windmill is one of these quaint little things characters in Cervantes' novel Don Quixote, right, were tilting at. I mean, they were, you know, what, 50 feet high? You could actually try to spear one of these things.
My boyfriend at the time was an architect. I remember talking with him on the phone, and he said, "How tall are they?" And I said, 400 feet. And he said, 400 feet? That's not human scale.
I just started hearing that there were going to be these 400-foot monstrosities, and they were just going up. There was no discussion, there was no research, there was no public outreach.
You know, wind is sort of interesting because it has this sort of aura of greenness.
They hear green energy, they think good. They see it on the TV and all the commercials now. If you notice, you see wind turbines, green this, green that. They're being bombarded with it. And it doesn't affect them directly, so they don't really take the time to learn.
These are mechanical structures. They're 40 stories tall. There's going to be some problems with noise and oil leaks and sediment runoff. I mean, this is just the way it is.
Now you have an object that's 400 and something feet tall, spinning at 150 miles an hour. Try and think about that for a second.
Holy mackerel. They're monstrous.
The proposal would be to put wind turbines as close as 1,000 feet from people's residences.
You don't have huge tracks where there are no people close by. So appropriate siting is the issue here.
When they build these out in the desert in California, there's no problem with residences. They're putting them up on tracts that are 6,000 acres, right? We don't have anything like that here. We have homes here.
Originally came to the town of Meredith because my father was born in East Meredith, and I came back to the family roots here in Delaware County, and I've never regretted it for a minute. Years ago, I ran for supervisor. I lost by 3 votes. The only elected thing I've ever been elected to is fire commissioner down there in the fire department. You know, we're a fire department that does the chicken barbecue thing and the pancake supper and all that, and we were looking for a way to make more money. We got the idea of Dairy Festival, and those cows advertised the sponsors. Turns out the cow signs are very popular and get stolen a lot. There was a broken, stolen cow that was recovered right on the front page of the Oneonta Star. Well, you know, we couldn't have paid for anything better than that. My wife and I talked with the wind developer, and it seemed like a good idea, so we pursued a little bit more. Next thing you know, we had a test tower up on the farm.
I didn't know what the hell that was. Saw it outside of my kitchen window. Said to my wife, "What's that?" We didn't have a clue. We had no idea what was involved. I started going on the internet, and the more I did this research, the more alarmed I got. And pretty soon, my wife and I were very alarmed. And so was our neighbor, Rachel, who lives across the road and who had been talking for several years about how nice it would be, you know, maybe have a couple of windmills.
I kept meeting really interesting people, and a lot of them happened to live in East Meredith. I bought a couple of acres almost 20 years ago. Then I eventually was able to build this house. I moved in, and then 3 weeks later, the whole wind situation happened. The Hamiltons have been my neighbors for all of these years, and we've always had a very good working neighbor relationship. They, of course, had signed a contract, and their land is all around.
Yeah, it would be a little inconvenience for us. We have to put up with the roads and the construction and all that. It isn't all gravy for the landowner. but it seemed like a small price to pay for what we thought was the public good.
I decided that I wanted to have a meeting to let the people in the neighborhood know what was going on. I tried to give them as much information, unbiased, just that we had 2 wind companies in the town, who they were, what they wanted.
And then all time goes by, and all of a sudden we're the bad people. We are the bad people. Oh my word. The neighbors are having meetings at their house. What to do about the Hamiltons. They are the bad people. We've got to stop them somehow.
John and I and his wife Mary, we don't see eye to eye about a lot of things, but we communicated. You know, they were over at our house often. We haven't had brunch with them since then, and I regret it.
I've been a picture framer for the last 19 years or so. I started my own business. I went out on my own almost 3 months ago. In the store where I used to work, we had a policy about not talking politics. Wind is a very contentious issue throughout the county, and people came in the store a lot and wanted to know what was happening. There's a big keep the peace thing around here, and I think that people saying that they're upset about something upsets other people. I'm part of a Main Street revitalization, but it is precarious. These are towns that are just starting to turn, hopefully in a good way, economically.
I've been here since 1987, which is when I got engaged to my wife, but now I'm here more than she is. Most of my business activities can be conducted through the internet. It used to be that you came up here, you were really isolated. This is an area of New York State that didn't have electricity until after the Second World War in many cases.
From the fire goes up to fire tubes that are surrounded by water, just like the steam engine you see on the old movies. And then the heat goes up the chimney.
We came here in 1971. The house had no doors or windows or heating or plumbing or electricity, but we walked inside and we looked around at the land and we knew this was it.
I was working at the old Weekly Life magazine. I was the last director of photography there and had been a writer and editor. So I would go in the city and come here on the weekends.
We had 3 children at that time, and we were all just so happy here. Ron thought that we would all be going back to the East Village together in the fall, but I knew that we couldn't leave.
Finding out that the Baileys had signed a contract was upsetting because we were very close.
I felt really good. I thought, well, if there's a blackout, if the grid goes down, at least those turbines will be churning away, putting electricity into the grid, and that we were helping the world. We wanted to help the world. The other reason we signed was the same reason everybody does. It was for money. We needed money.
It was $5,000, and my wife was having dental work done that came to about that.
Sue Bailey came over to see my dream house for the first time, and it was really difficult.
I think we were blinded by the money. I never thought, for example, what our neighbors across the road would think.
The salesman put a piece of paper on the kitchen table. He brought maps, and I love maps. And I said, may I copy those maps? And he said, no. But I'll send you some if you'll sign this piece of paper indicating that you're really interested. It said something like, I will not divulge the nature of our relationship to anyone.
we found out that there were a lot of wind developers who were prospecting, right? They even call it prospecting.
There'd be people driving up and down the road, and I felt like our neighborhood was being stalked.
There were salesmen from several companies sort of sneaking around all of Delaware County for 2 years.
There's a lot of considerations when you're talking about building a wind farm.
We have to look at land area because it's not really worth it to us to only put up a couple of turbines.
Our job site is about a 15-mile to 30-mile span. We have a lot of managers to manage different areas.
Right now we're at the Maple Ridge Wind Farm in upstate New York, just outside the little hamlet of Lowville. We're standing at the site of a tower that will be put in the air here very shortly. One wind turbine consists of many different parts. We have a base, a lower mid, upper mid, and a top.
I had sort of a feeling of foreboding when I first saw them from about 3 miles away. And I drove down among them and I turned off the engine, rolled the windows down, and I really listened, and I was horrified. And it's not even that they were so loud, you know, just a ch, ch, ch. But it was the idea that it was forever and that it would be that way for the next 25, 28 years. It would be that way for the rest of my life.
We got out of the lease.
They hired a lawyer, as I understand it, got out of their contract with electricity, gave them money back that they had been given.
He was going to divorce me if I wouldn't have shut up, and I would not shut up. And 3.5 weeks from now is our 50th wedding anniversary.
That was a turning point because they had a stature in the community that made a whole lot of people pay attention.
I started work on a letter to inform our neighbors when development might be taking place, and I included a map with each letter, and people would show up on our kitchen porch clutching this letter and map in their hands, and they were astounded that this was happening right under their noses, and they hadn't known about it.
When we came here, I was really looking forward to being involved with the community, but since wind has come, it's ironic because I feel like I'm doing the right thing and I feel like I'm being protective of my community, but many people don't see it that way. They think that I'm being, I don't know, aggressive or nasty or a downstater. I mean, my thinking is I'm a taxpayer and I live here and this is where I've made my home and I really want to help keep it that way. The views are breathtaking. It's quiet. We go up on top of the hill and check out the sunset pretty much on a daily basis. My husband's in charge of getting our self-sustaining farm going. We get the chickens. We have 2 pigs and a bunch of cats and a dog. The wind developer sent us a package, and if we wanted to see the contract, we were going to have to sign a confidentiality agreement, which basically excluded me from speaking to anybody other than my attorney.
It's a way that the companies can play one neighbor off against another. They can prevent the neighbors from cooperating and from getting together and trying to get the best deal for themselves.
In Delaware County, we're targeted because we are one of the bottom 5 poorest counties in New York State. We have no zoning, and it's all local government run. So we fit the check marks in a lot of different ways.
Our town it's an agricultural town that was agricultural. We've lost most of our farms.
There's the understandable desire to have income from the turbines for the town government. Constantly having to buy new trucks and machinery to take care of the highways. That's the big cost. And there's also great empathy on the board with farmers. They think it's a way, basically, to save the dairy farms.
We're living in a county which had maybe 1,000 dairy farms. Virtually everybody who lived here was in the dairy farm business.
Today, there's less than 10.
Unfortunately, we are one of the few remaining farms in the area shipping milk. It's just harder and harder to do business on the land.
I mean, the thing that I really wanted to get involved with was to find a viable model for farming. And if you directly market to people who want natural, grass-fed, no chemicals, no hormones, you can actually make it work.
The economy of the town is no longer dairy farming. There are many niche farms of little organic vegetable farms, grass-fed beef farms. These are the new farms.
It's very interesting to try to find what you do to have a community like this grow and still maintain its integrity, to save the parts that work and that are precious to people. My husband and I had started a publishing company in 1985, so we were in New York a lot. We were here certainly every weekend and more when we could be. I never did feel particularly foreign here. I'm not sure that I have a bone for feeling foreign anyway, but this place, this house, belonged to a cousin of mine who lost it in the Depression. And that was purely an accident. We had no idea when we were looking. I applied for the planning board. I've been the chair, I think, for 5 years. I think the first proposal mentioned 40 turbines, and that seemed to me to be a lot of something that big in a place that's rural and residential.
We needed to develop a wind energy local law. And at that point, we left it up to the planning board, to make recommendations to the town board. It took about a year.
We could have done it in no time, but we really thought that we had to find out what might really change people's lives, what might really have a serious impact on them.
The state doesn't have any laws surrounding it. They don't really regulate it. The federal government doesn't regulate it, the siting issues. So it's left to the towns.
We have a planning board, which is 7 volunteers. I give them a lot of credit because in the last year plus, they have done countless hours of research and reading, and it's a thankless job.
I would say, 95% of these towns are not really equipped to really do the kind of research.
A note from my past, I worked on encyclopedias for a long time. I've had people send me stuff from Europe. There are many, many professional journals. So I have a pretty good idea of what's solid information and what isn't.
Turbines draw upon the force of moving air to generate electricity by rotating propeller-like blades around a rotor. The motion of the rotor turns the drive shaft, which turns an electric generator.
The energy is there in the wind, and then the wind is turned into the mechanical energy of the rotating blades, and then that rotates an axle, like the axle on your car, and then that rotates something inside of the generator, and that's what feeds power onto the grid and eventually ends up in your home.
Power providers see wind farms as an environmentally attractive way to generate clean power for their customers. So the number of wind farms in the U.S. today is rapidly increasing.
I see wind as potentially a positive part of the kind of change that I'd like to see happen in Delaware County. I worked as a full-time employee of the Delaware County Electric Cooperative for a couple years. We looked at Meredith as a potential site where it might make sense for a developer to think about putting turbines in the future.
The co-op had as its main engineer a good young man, very bright and attuned to the community.
I think of it as it's a much more complex issue than how can we be more clean or how can we be more renewable. I'd like to be able to buy as much of my food and grow as much of my food very locally as I can. I'd like to have as much of my energy come from very local sources.
He had suggested at one time that possibly there would be a way of doing a community project that would probably feed into the grid, but the money that comes from it could be in part community money.
I spent a lot of time sitting in planning board meetings in Meredith for, I don't know, a year and a half.
He's no longer on the project, but while he was wonderful about answering questions, providing us with information, giving us the weights of the parts of the turbines, all kinds of technical things that are very, very useful. I mean, who would have imagined that one blade is 7 tons?
I suspect that what a developer would want to do is use the largest turbine they can. For every dollar they invest in a turbine, they're going to get more energy out of the larger ones.
You can find wind as you keep going up, and that's why these things keep getting larger and larger.
Each of these turbines is an industrial facility. It's like having several factories come in.
But when you're talking about building a wind turbine, a lot of big pieces and big machinery involved. You want to make sure that the roads are strong enough to hold all this big equipment.
They're very large blades. They're 130 feet long.
Each foundation has about a 52 feet diameter and 9 feet deep. That's a lot of concrete. I mean, you're talking about 400 feet in the air. You want to make sure that it stands up correctly.
In the last year plus, I've learned more about wind than I think anybody needs to know in a lifetime, and I still haven't even scratched the surface. There's just so many questions, so many unknowns. There was really very little about wind in the newspaper, and in the local papers, when you open up, there's, you know, the columns of each little town, and some of it's very quaint. I felt that there was a need for the town of Meredith, both to cover those lighthearted things, but also to try to educate and connect people.
Turbines have specific kinds of noise characteristics which are unusual. You know, aside from them, there's all these gear noises and machinery noises. In particular, they use low-frequency sounds.
It isn't just the noise, according to this father of two, it's the vibration.
That rumbling feeling that you would get, or somebody with a loudspeaker system in their car drives by, you feel that in your body. That is the sensation that we feel from the turbine.
You know, if you look at it from a distance, it sort of looks relatively graceful or slow, but actually the tip of the blade compresses the air against the columns, and you get this whomping sound.
Each blade weighs 22,000 pounds. The tips of those blades are moving at 178 miles an hour. But most amazing is the sound.
There have been some peer review articles, and clearly the sound is way worse and way different than predicted. At night in particular, which then has a whole host of cascading cardiovascular effects, more absenteeism from work, school performance for kids. And if you look at World Health Organization, they recommend that when you're dealing with a low frequency component, you actually have stricter sound regulations. The wind developers are tending to just be completely dismissive. Variations on the theme is it's not so bad, or you'll get used to it. They don't want to have regulations which put into print what are standard public health recommendations, because they can't actually physically do that and have a wind project in a place this close to human beings.
When I'm driving up the county road and I see that Met Tower, and I hold my hand out like this, and I say, okay, as high as a windmill is, okay, yep, right there. That's how high the windmill's gonna be on that hill. That high. Now, that's not much.
What may be impossible to comprehend on a television screen is the sheer size of each turbine.
I'm 6 feet tall. 42 of me would get you up to the rotor. 65 of me, 391 feet up, is the tip of the very topmost blade.
What I had read about these problems was a little troubling, but I thought you really have to see it for yourself. The shadow flicker on the roads was far worse than I could have imagined. The shadows were extraordinarily dense, and I'm a very steady driver.
Well, let's cut all the trees down alongside the road, because as you drive down the road, the trees have a shadow flicker that hits your windshield.
The strobing effect when the sun gets behind a wind turbine where the blades are turning, you know, some people are driven crazy by it.
I found it extremely troubling to think of subjecting people to that, just putting it here and having people deal with it.
There's a whole host of things that occur with any industrial development that you have to think about.
These are one of those energy turbines that you have probably seen driving down the freeway, and one is actually on fire near Bird's Landing. John?
Well, they're really not doing anything to fight it, Deirdre, because as this thing burns up, you know, a lot of very heavy flaming pieces keep falling down to the ground there, so it's almost better off to stay back away from it. Looks like it's going to just go ahead and burn all the composites off of those wings.
Yeah, you know, and it's interesting. You don't even get a perspective of just how large these things are until you're up close like that.
I could land on that motor and have plenty of room to spare.
I wouldn't advise that today.
Nah.
Your emergency squad goes up and your fire department, and they stand around and hope nothing terrible happens. The nacelle is 280 feet up in the air. What are you going to do? You can't get there.
They're worried about wafting chunks of ice a mile. And when they get iced up, they shut off.
The research that's done for ice throws is very, very poor, and the mechanisms for preventing them, even according to GE, are not very good.
They'll talk about ice throw, they'll talk about the shadow flicker, but really I think that has to do with the visuals. They don't want to see them.
These are really complicated issues, and if you're back far enough, so if there's a mistake, you're not in terrible trouble, I think that's all to the good.
I think it's very subjective. I think, you know, looking at wind turbines, I think some people have looked at them and said they're beautiful. And I think others say, well, we'll get used to them.
At the beginning, this is the room we had the major problem in.
Glenn Wilds is standing in what used to be his bedroom. You see, his family doesn't live here anymore. Wind turbines drove them out.
We were feeling awful itchy in the house, major headaches. Our hearts were really pounding.
I was getting sicker again this year.
A block away, Sandy McLeod has the exact day they turned the turbines on near her home marked on her calendar.
Night after night after night without sleep, and you got so exhausted.
Just around the corner, Helen Forster runs off the symptoms she and her neighbors have been experiencing for well over a year now.
I have tinnitus and pressure in my ears and fatigue, heart palpitations.
You know, the companies that are doing this aren't buying anybody out. What they're doing is leasing the land and are all LLCs, which means their responsibilities are limited.
Glenn and Brenda Wilds worry about their son and his growing family, who also live amongst the turbines, but can't afford to move.
I don't know how you walk into a population of people and say, you, and you, we no longer care what happens to you.
The pattern has been that the town board does what the planning board recommends. The planning board is their advisory board. Lo and behold, the town board is not following the planning board's recommendations.
If the proposal that's been advanced thus far by the planning board is not one that the town board is prepared to endorse, we have to write something else.
There were questions from the developers about things that would limit the numbers of turbines.
Some of the setbacks, especially setbacks from property lines, were very restrictive.
A setback is the distance from a turbine to a property line or a residence.
Our setbacks are really not very good setbacks.
In our case, they were trying for 2,500 feet from a residence and 1,600 feet from a property line.
I'd feel pretty comfortable at a mile. I would think that pretty fair.
The chair of the planning board said that the recommendations that she would like to follow would mean even longer setbacks. So she already compromised.
All over the world, they've been finding that the troubles that come from wind farms are very much reduced if you have good setback.
The only difference I see is that we wouldn't have regulated setbacks. Is that true, or am I off base here?
Except for fall zone.
In some of the earlier wind projects, they were instituting setbacks of 1.5 times wind turbine height. So if you had a 400-foot wind turbine, that setback might be 600 feet to, in essence, account for if it fell over, which they do sometimes.
The whole turbine is, you're talking 600,000 pounds. 600,000 pounds doesn't land with a whimper.
Folks in one Oklahoma town feeling the ground actually shake this morning.
The tremor was not an earthquake, however, rather a wind turbine.
I can't believe someone put something together wrong. They forgot to tighten the bolts or something.
Actually, a worker reports the turbine's brakes broke, allowing the blades to spin at twice their normal rate, causing the top two sections to come crashing to the ground.
It's really important that the turbines be set back far enough from the neighbors' properties, and there's no place in town where they can be set back far enough.
If we had accepted carte blanche the recommendations that the planning board had made, it would have essentially banned anything in the town of Meredith.
Spencer from county planning had done maps for us. It pretty well shows what the setbacks do on some different parcels of land in the town of Meredith.
I don't know if Meredith makes sense to the wind companies. They don't have enough landowners signed. They have a couple of people. I think they've got one over here and one over there, but there's no way to attach them. And that's the key when they site these. They need to be able to put a bunch of them in one area where they can just keep putting them boom, boom, boom right next to each other.
Would it be a problem if I saw a turbine that from here looked like an inch high if it was on the horizon? Or would you mind looking at a 410-foot turbine 600 feet from your property line? Would that really be okay? Would it be okay to see 4 or 6 or 8 of them in a row?
We're not against alternate sources of energy. We're against these monstrosities.
We want renewable energy. We're not opposed to a small-scale project here where it's not towering over our property lines and it's not interfering with our sleep and it's not affecting our property values and so on.
Given what we've been trying to do with protecting people, I don't know how many turbines would fit in there. I don't know where they would all go.
If we make a strict ordinance and regulation, people can opt out of that, what they call good neighbor contracts, where you agree to sign on as a good neighbor, not complain, but you're compensated.
If it turns out that this is a place where you can't put some ideal number of turbines, that's life. I don't know where we're going with this. I mean, I think we ought to start talking about what this town really wants to do. You know, if there's a possibility of any kind of community project that's smaller, we should be thinking seriously about it.
It is time to do something. I don't think we can just diddle around anymore.
You know, there's a lot of money here, and my sense is that if you look, talking to people all over the state, that the wind developers that targeted the decision makers in town board members, planning board members.
When we still had the lease, I was on the town planning board, had been on for about 5 years, and I resigned, saying that I would have a conflict of interest because I'd been approached by electricity. But I felt that not many other people who had conflicts of interest owned up to them.
Basically, there's a segment of this community that has shunned them. People who they've known for 30 years won't talk to them, will turn their back on them.
I mean, everybody's doing what they think is right, and that makes for big, deep felt conflicts.
I've been an environmentalist for, my whole adult life and didn't understand the issues about turbines, what it means to live with them.
In the beginning, we were like the enemy of the people.
And yes, it would be in my backyard.
People did not like what we were saying.
They're a bunch of wackos. They're not looking to the future. This is something that we need. We should do this.
And the fact that we would say anything against wind, that's like a crime. I mean, wind is green.
Rachel told me about this and asked me if I wanted to come to a meeting and explained her point of view on what was going on. Very quickly I saw that there's bigger issues here than what are being presented in the mainstream media. If you don't get that information on your own, you're going to end up believing what you're being told. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I think the issues here are driven by money.
I moved here 5 years ago to basically retire and run my small business. The plan was to put up solar and possibly a small wind turbine to produce my own electricity. At one point, a neighbor stopped by and said that we're going to have industrial wind turbines in Meredith. Being in the financial business for 25 years, I started to do some research on how these wind turbine projects are put together and how they are funded, and came up with the conclusion that this is not a good idea. When you talk to the wind companies, they put all these little things on it. The bottom line is they're making a ton of money, and that's why they're here.
I mean, this is not green energy, in the sense of renewable energy. This is green energy. This is big money.
The old follow the money thing is appropriate here.
The wind developer is getting money from federal, state, and private investors.
You don't make money in business today without taking some risk and without having money.
The risk is very much minimized by the federal tax credits that they're getting, which come from federal taxes, which are your or my money. State incentives, and on my electric bill, where I pay into this fund that pays for renewable energy. So again, I'm paying for it. And then, of course, you have your private investors, whoever's on Wall Street these days, who hasn't been glommed.
We actually, as taxpayers, will wind up paying on some of these projects more in tax dollars and tax breaks to the wind companies than the wind companies will actually invest.
The largest wind developers in New York State are investment banks. They basically get to depreciate the turbine over a 5 or 6 year period.
If that wind project is sold, that new wind company can now start the depreciation all over again and get all the same tax write-offs that the first company gets. And that's why they do the trades.
What seems to be the pattern from the research we've done, they'll sell it to somebody else who will then get his accelerated depreciation, and on it goes.
JP Morgan can sell it to Goldman Sachs and they can redepreciate it over another 5 years. It's quite magical.
New York State has made a goal of 25% of our electric energy from alternative sources, so they put incentives in it.
New York State and the federal government and local government seem to think that it makes economic sense to give all of these tax incentives, that are available only to wealthy corporations, huge corporations.
The town can or cannot benefit depending upon how well it negotiates a deal. The developer will cry poverty.
So these companies have the incredible chutzpah to come into these little towns, which are mostly poverty-stricken, and ask them for tax breaks.
The big companies take out 90-some% of the income from a turbine. They give a couple of percent to the landowner and a couple of percent maybe to the town. To me, that's exploitation.
It doesn't give you enough for a pickup truck for the highway department every year. It's not a lot of money.
Meredith is not, a fancy, well-to-do town. There are other towns in Delaware County, like Andes and Bovina, where they've banned industrial wind development in their towns outright. They have the money and the political muscle to do that.
I think for us, this is what it's all about. Kind of takes your breath away, right? Maybe people in Meredith are nicer than people in Bovina. We weren't asking for reasonable setbacks. Our whole thing was we don't want them, period. But we had to dig our heels in and fight. This was a fight. This is big money, and how could you expect that when a program of this magnitude, which could be $75 million, $100 million, that they're going to compassionately feel bad for me or for you? They've done this many times. They have an agenda. They're very deliberate. They're very smart. This is big money, big companies, big politics. I've referred to them as modern-day carpetbaggers, and that's what they are. They're coming in and taking that ridge, and they'll throw out some money on the table for the municipality just for a quick financial fix, maybe buy a new truck or something. Can you imagine such a thing?
We all know that upstate New York has seen better times. And even though the townships are getting an initial windfall of money, down the road, the negative impact would be so severe, in my opinion, that it might be irreversible. And I will tell you, being in real estate for 37 years now, that the number one reason people are buying here is because of its pristine nature, the ridge lines, the views. We have several 100,000 acres of hiking trails that people go into to just have peace and tranquility. And people come up from the city and see shooting stars and constellations with a crystal clear sky because we don't have industry. So I think that we have to be very careful being stewards of the land to make sure we don't make one error in judgment after another and spoil the very areas that we need most to protect.
A lot of the other towns were banning wind. We were trying to work within the parameters of recognizing and respecting property owners' rights.
Is there anyone here opposed to industrial wind turbine in Meredith? Opposed, okay. How many of you might support a community alternative energy project?
I was happy just to come to Meredith and just to be on my little farm and mind my own business and not get involved. I mean, if you had asked me if I would be an activist, that would have not been on the top 10 things of what I wanted to be when I grew up. You know, ballerina might have been on there, but not activist, and certainly not wind activist.
How many of you have stayed up late at least one night thinking about the Meredith wind issue? Okay. How many of you have actually lost sleep? Okay.
15 of us got together, and we incorporated as a not-for-profit.
As for the Alliance for Meredith, we are volunteer-based, and this meeting shows that we're all willing to work together despite our differences.
The Alliance for Meredith would like to see a town-owned community wind project, built here.
There's been this Meredith Alliance formed. Maybe you've even read some of their publications. I won't read them, but every now and then my wife reads it to me. I try not to listen.
The town has organized itself, and I know there's been some resentment. I don't resent it at all. I think it would be foolish not to. It's like asking some poor miner to negotiate a good deal with Bethlehem Steel.
Who do you want for a neighbor? Who do you personally want for a neighbor? Do you want somebody for a neighbor that when the pager goes off, he's there with the ambulance to help you out? And if the windmill will help that guy be there, accept it. Just plain accept it.
People I talk to, people I see every day, the people that live and work here, really don't have a problem with it. There's this minority of people. I know they hate it when I say that, but it's a very vocal minority that have been very aggressive, and they're very good at what they do.
We thought we were in the minority, but as we went door to door, talked to our neighbors, we were quite taken aback. We felt there had to be a group representing the interests of the residents and not the interests of the wind developers or the small handful of large landowners, right, who had signed leases.
Town boards in New York State seem to traditionally be made up of people who are large landowners, partially because no one else wanted the job. Town board meetings generally are arduous, boring meetings, and these people have done these jobs for years and years. Nobody ever went to the meetings. And now all of the town boards are being observed. And I think that that is upsetting to the town board members. They feel unappreciated and disrespected.
What happens in any contentious issue, people you don't ordinarily see begin to take an interest. Yes, it makes the meetings hard, but I welcome it. A part of the town board thought, in some sense, we'd gone over to the enemy.
You know, these are not some distant strangers. These are friends and neighbors.
Roger Hamilton has an obvious conflict of interest. His father signed a wind contract with Airtricity. Paul Menke is also a board member of the Delaware County Electric Cooperative, and he has said that he would recuse himself. Marge Rockefeller, I know that she thinks that we're being mean. Our town board generally votes according to what Frank wants. Frank, what do you think? Okay, then we'll go along with Frank.
And as for Frank, he is one of the best men I know. And his wife, Gretel, is a saint.
I like to think that people are genuinely good people and they want to do the right thing. I think having money waved in front of your face makes it very hard to do that.
I can't see how it cannot be conflict of interest when your board members are going to benefit from a law that they're passing.
We're here to kind of keep working on the regulations.
Town government is kind of interesting. We're a representative democracy. We're elected by the townspeople to make decisions. And sometimes we have to make decisions, you know, very often based on our own personal beliefs and what we believe is right for the town.
The attorney, Rosemary Nichols, basically rewrote the law. She is outside of her role, in my opinion, and many others.
I perceive the planning board's statement of findings as being basically making a moral or an ethical judgment about the appropriateness of wind energy. So I operated on an assumption that, in fact, there was going to be commercial wind. And that's the way I wrote it.
She has become, in a sense, one of our officials versus an advisor to our officials.
Rosemary? Yes.
I didn't get mine until Saturday, so I haven't had a chance to review it. I don't know about anybody else.
Saturday.
Saturday? Today.
They haven't even gotten things a day in advance to read.
The sense from the town board was that we should create a separate board. And the board is called a Wind Energy Review Board.
They want to appoint 7 citizens to a wind board. And then these 7 citizens basically have complete control over where wind turbines go.
And it has one function, which is reviewing wind energy applications.
Who appoints these board members?
The town board.
Now, who are they going to appoint? They're going to appoint people that are, in my opinion, are going to be friendly towards what they want.
I've been appalled by the fact that they let the town planning board work for nearly a year, working very hard with no pay, and the town board is throwing the whole thing out with no research.
I think that Frank feels that he is doing what is right. The wind companies are presenting a very one-sided view, and I think that he is believing that.
The response I got to things that the town didn't like mostly was, I've talked it over with the developers and they say it's not true. And I mean, it's just a silly response.
No ice throw shall be permitted off the site?
Yeah.
Well, they as part of the application, they provide us with the information about how far the ice throws. And as part of that, they show where it goes.
The measurements that are done beforehand are not necessarily that good. When these things go up, and they've cost a few $1 million to get up, what are you going to do?
You have an international company with this cadre of lawyers and, you know, deep pockets, and then you have Meredith.
Point of information for performance standards?
You know,
No?
no, we're not taking.
It's just a point of information.
Something that I had hoped we could keep at bay seems to be happening, and that is the town has become very divided.
Reckless describes the actions of Frank Batchelor, Meredith Town Supervisor. Batchelor ignored and tossed away like trash more than a year of meticulous, carefully crafted, sensible research from the Meredith Planning Board. In search of a buck, At the expense of the public, Batchelor arbitrarily replaced the board's recommendation with one based on the developer's wishes.
They made copies of it, and they had hundreds of them, and some of the folks that are there were friends and ripped up a whole lot of them.
So reducing it to 2.5 times.
Dear editor, I know Frank is a fellow farmer and the husband of a most remarkable wife who happened to be my 6th grade teacher. I have never known him to do anything solely for his own benefit ever. He has always been there when a neighbor was in need or when an issue had to be resolved.
And this town board does not want to ban it. And I think that's the message we were trying to get to you.
What we hear over and over again is Frank is going to shove these turbines down our throats, whether we want them or not.
I guess it comes down at one level to a question of whether or not you trust the board.
I didn't get the
Whether or not you trust the board.
The board.
It's been difficult for my family. My wife has taken the divisiveness and the rancor and the anger. She's taken that to heart. It's hurt. And I think, we'll both be glad when it's over.
What the wind companies and corporations have done over the years is the split. You split the town, you get so many people for you, you know you're going to get so many people against you, and people who have been friends for years, people who have gone over to people's houses for picnics and dinners, helped each other out. Now people don't talk to each other. People hate each other. People saying vile things about each other, and it's only going to get worse.
Dear neighbor, after being silenced for months, the public will have a chance to speak concerning this proposed wind law.
We're concerned about the dependence on foreign oil and the effects of global warming. Unfortunately, Meredith has a vocal group of relative newcomers.
Our greatest natural resource is not wind or even solar power, but our relationships to each other.
If you were in trouble, no matter what it was, right, your neighbors would come to your assistance.
I've been disturbed to be told that I don't really have a voice because I haven't lived here 30 years.
Now there's neighbors that won't speak to you because you're on the other side of the issue.
The rudeness and unpleasantness in my town, it hurts.
I was disappointed that there weren't more people there to speak in favor of the wind turbines.
The penetrating low-frequency aspect of the noise, a thundering vibration, much like the throbbing bass of a neighboring disco.
These turbines are going to be between us and the sun. Every single window I look out of, I will see shadow flicker.
Frank, you've already said, if we go to the regs, the way the planning board put them out, we will not be able to have wind turbines in the town of Meredith. Maybe that is the point.
Where are the developers? How come they're not here making presentations to us, telling us what they'll do for us?
As a reference librarian, I've done some research on the effects of industrial wind turbines on bird and bat populations. The same ridges used by raptors are also likely locations for possible wind turbine development.
What about the farmers that I've been fighting for? Where are they?
I cannot sit quietly knowing the risk of wind turbines and loving my children, sacrificing the things that I have to ensure their safety and well-being, and watch this town make a decision that's going to impact their lives.
I listened to everyone. I heard them loud and clear. One of the speakers, David Hood, I can tell you exactly what he said. He said, I've known Frank for many years, I voted for him many times, and I voted for other people on this board.
No one on the board stood for election based upon their position about industrial wind. So by putting it off until the November election, I think it's the fair thing to do. I think it's a democratic thing to do. And I'll even go further and say I think it's an honorable thing to do.
So I kind of changed my position. The way I looked at it was, why should I keep fighting? I think the thing that may have surprised the Alliance for Meredith was that they focused on me this whole time, and there's 4 other people on my town board, and they're the ones that made the decision in the end.
Frank Batchelor voted against the wind ordinance. Mankey recused himself. The 3 other board members voted for it, so it was passed. They were going to do what they were going to do, and Rosemary Nichols was going to get her wind ordinance passed, and she really doesn't care what these people who live here think, feel, or how this is going to affect their lives.
The only recourse we have elections in November, and we will do whatever is necessary to try to defeat big turbines. The first act I intend to step forward with when elected is to fire the town attorney. Everyone in the town who wants to come and talk, we will listen. There will be no sessions in which, oh, we talk, you listen, and if you say anything, you're rude.
I think the town will physically look different to me if we win the election. Instead of like this place which is under threat and anything could happen, I'll feel, like it is what it is, which is this beautiful place which people really care about and are going to protect.
We can move. We can take our pigs and chickens and our cats and dogs and off we go. There's other people on the other hand who are not going to have that luxury. They're stuck.
In our own household, we spend an inordinate amount of time talking about turbines. And sometimes one of us has to say, stop for a while.
People that are extremely fearful of it and extremely passionate about stopping it seem to feel that it's a change like no other that has ever happened to Delaware County. It is going to have catastrophic impacts, right?
I think I will want to leave. All those years we raised 4 children here, and our grandchildren come back, and it's a really wonderful place for them to come back to. And if we have to leave, it won't be easy.
The way I looked at it was something for the farmers that would help supplement their income. We're losing the farms. That's really the story around here. In the beginning, I just thought, our community will embrace this. I was very naive.
I'm all for a small project that could benefit Meredith. I have no problem with it. But see, it won't end there. That's the problem. It's a lot of money to put in all the infrastructure. So once they have the infrastructure in, it's cheaper to add to an existing project than it is to go out and develop a new one. The fear is like what happened in Tug Hill. It starts off as 20, and then it's 30, and then it's 80, and then it's 100, and they just keep putting them up.
I was born and raised here on Tug Hill. I've been here my whole life, and now this. Well, initially when they come in and they started selling the idea of wind power, it was supposed to be 79.5 megawatts, so that it would have been about 50 towers, but this project ballooned up to 4 times that amount, and it encompasses over 21,000 acres of land. From my vantage point, I can stand and count over 170 of the 195 turbines that are erected.
I was only going to have 1 or 2 within 3,000 feet of my property, and I ended up with 7. I've put all my life investment into that house, and I live here and I love it here. I'm born and raised here.
One person that came in here described it as invasion of the pod people, and I kind of liked that analogy.
What was scenic and beautiful and serene has now become an industrial area here.
Would you consider retiring in my home at fair market value? Or if you had the money or the funding, would you consider not living near these things?
The noise that these towers give off, the shadows that they give off, the medical effects living among these towers, they claim that there's nothing wrong, that everything is okay. Well, I don't believe that.
I just started to get like dizzy spells, and like my ears always felt off. You know, I felt sick to my stomach from the time I got up in the morning to the time I went to bed. And the only thing that really had changed, I mean, I've lived here for 8 years now, was the windmill started. This one across the road, as I've been told, is 1,050 feet from where we live. It's just too close. I mean, there are times like I'll lay in my bed and it sounds like the noise is in the walls. Like the walls are vibrating, and then I'll get up and look out the window and you can hear it's the windmill.
When there's a front coming in, they start turning faster, and then when moisture gets into it, the noise will compound.
What comes to mind is your vacuum cleaner running beside your bed all night. It keeps you awake.
In the spring, those ones way down there flicker inside of my house, and they're probably 6,000 or 8,000 feet away. My son's got a TV, he likes to play his Nintendo. You can't set that TV anywhere in those rooms if there's a window nearby, because you can see windmills spinning in it, plus the lighting is going on and off. He can't concentrate.
The wintertime, it's the worst, and I think it's because the reflection of the snow. Those shadows will go through the windows. It looks like we have a disco ball.
He actually takes blankets and puts over the drapes because the drapes don't quite drown it all out. Your local television stations, forget it, they're gone.
Due to the windmills, the TV comes in and out.
In out.
Oh, sure, you can go and complain all you want. We've been going to the town board meetings for a year and a half. They just tell us to sit down and shut up.
People just have given up trying to fight these bastards.
Traveling salesmen is what they are. They come into your town, they convince you, sell you a bill of goods, and then they're off and gone with no remorse or no concern of what they've done to your area or done to the environment, all in the name of green energy. It's not green energy, it's greed.
They made the people feel like they were their best friends in the whole world. You can trust us, we'll tell you everything you need to know. Don't listen to anyone else. And the people trusted them.
Generally what happens with these companies, they'll come into the area, they find out who the supervisor is, who the town board members are, who the planning board members are. They'll look up what kind of holdings they have. They'll find out information about them.
They have their big boy tactics that they bring in and totally broadside small town governments, and that's what they did here.
I am not against renewable energy. I am against the way that they snuck around, the way that they played the town board, the planning board.
Yes, the towns get a little bit of money, but the people aren't seeing that money. Oh, but wait, our town supervisor has them on his property. A couple of our town board member families have them on their property.
I don't have a wind contract, and I didn't ask for anything ridiculous back then. No, it's not going to be that way now. Now I know what they are.
$500 for a neighbor agreement to live next to these, that's an insult. It's a joke. You know, it's humiliating.
We basically call them gag orders because you can't speak out against them negatively.
Anybody that gets one of these agreements and takes it to a good bona fide lawyer that is totally neutral says you got to be insane to sign one of these agreements and to go along with this, because you are absolutely signing your rights away.
I mean, to me, what are they trying to hide? If this is a great thing, why can't you find out information on it? Why do you have to search so hard? Why is it so secretive?
This world today, everybody's strapped. I can sympathize with anybody trying to get any money for their property and their taxes. But you really better stop and see what it's all worth.
This is 24/7, 365 days a year. It doesn't go away.
Ask questions. Do your homework. Because once you make your decision and you let these guys in, your world is going to change forever, and there's not a thing that you're going to be able to do about it.
Hello, this is Dan Birnbaum calling, candidate for town council, and we're calling everybody to remind them about Tuesday's election.
For many years, I've participated in town elections in one way or another, and yet they have not had a lot of importance. But this time, there would be a real reason for people to vote. If we lose on this issue, I would say, well, I think the people are wrong, but it's their town. Right now, I feel that the town board wants to jam them down our throats.
We don't have East Meredith yet.
On election night, my wife was at the party, and she said that when the poll watcher walked through the door, everybody fell silent. Then he gave the numbers, and the place just erupted. We had not only won, but had won big.
The way I'm reading it, you are banning community wind?
If someone were to come in and propose something that was local, that was homegrown, and possibly doing a small project with the town with small wind, I think people would probably be receptive to it. But you know, it's been a hard couple of years. I think everybody needs to catch his breath. This technology changes all the time. We will be working on all kinds of alternative energy for any of the citizens in the town who want to do it.
I think if we were sure that these turbines were really going to solve the problem of global warming, and what happened in the town of Meredith would make a huge difference, then you're talking from a very different premise. But I don't think that this is doing what we would all hope it would do. That is solving a very serious problem.
Wind is not going to solve the problem, yet it's being touted by the wind companies that it will. It can't. When you do the numbers, it cannot.
They're never going to make more than a tiny little dent, an unmeasurable dent in greenhouse gas emissions.
Wind is intermittent, so there'll be times when a wind farm will be producing no electrical power.
They talk about, 3 megawatt turbine, it's a 60 megawatt project. When you factor in the efficiency, it's producing 10% or 30% of that number.
Since it's sporadic, they have to keep the conventional plants running. So the coal plants are still running. The gas plants are still running. There are very few oil plants, so that's not really an issue.
When you model how much CO2 did I avoid releasing by making wind power, you have to make assumptions. And the most likely scenario is that it's going to be a natural gas plant that you're displacing. You could make wind farms look a lot better by saying we're always going to replace coal. But the coal plants are more often sort of base production. What happens if the wind farm's producing gangbusters and then 5 minutes later it's off? They have plants that are being paid a little bit more to ramp up and down, and those are going to be natural gas plants typically.
And the more wind power you get online, right, the more backup power there has to be.
The great American entrepreneur T. Boone Pickens knows a lot of things, but one is how to make money. And if he's interested in renewable energy, we all better start taking a look at it.
There's no longer just gas and oil companies, they're energy companies, and they're in wind as well as in gas and oil. And the huge profits that they reap by maintaining the power and control does not, we're going to trust the same companies that have brought us to this point to get us out of this, to give us the answer?
You, I know, have been focusing on wind. What percentage of electricity in this country could be generated by sustainable energy?
This is a DOE map. Right across the top, it says that 20%. I think you could do the 20% in less than 10 years.
You have this kind of absurd technology, which is really going to be, like, at the best, a Band-Aid, and you're throwing gazillions of dollars into this.
Very few people understand that this is the one kind of electric power plant that draws its power from the grid. If you have a heating mechanism so you don't have icing, you use a lot of electricity. These things are on standby so they can be turned off remotely at any time. There's all kinds of stuff in the nacelle that has to keep turning so it'll be ready to turn. There's a yaw mechanism, that's all done electrically, and that's all coming off the grid. And where what comes off the grid squares with what goes back on the grid, I don't know. I haven't been able to find any real figures.
Production of a 450-foot wind turbine and everything that goes involved with it is astronomical. The manufacture, the transportation, the installation, the cement, it's a tremendous amount of pollution, CO2 they're putting into the air to get them to produce electricity.
But, we're just going to go lockstep into this and basically put up tens of thousands, which is what we're talking about, tens of thousands of wind turbines in the most pristine and beautiful parts of this country, clear-cutting, fragile ridge tops, building roads, transporting immense amounts of concrete for each of these bases, which are often blasted 30 feet into the bedrock.
You've got 610,000 pounds of concrete and rebar under each of these.
It's just going to be one resource after another.
Surprising numbers of bats are being killed at wind energy sites. Biologist Erin Bearwald and her colleagues spent 9 weeks collecting freshly killed bats around wind turbines. More than 90% had lung hemorrhages consistent with the bends. Bat autopsies revealed that air pressure drops around turbine blades are fatal to small animals like bats.
We have a responsibility to steward the land, and we've been letting corporate America take over our resources and make money at the detriment of people and the environment, and that really has to stop.
To get to 20%, I think it makes quite clear you really need to focus on transmission.
You're talking about a vast expansion in terms of the amount of capacity that we have in place today. Indeed, transmission has been one of the challenges associated with a variable resource like wind, because as it turns out, where the wind is not often where the people are.
The high tension lines and the electrical companies and the wind farms, they're all related. They're all connected in one way or another. So people who feel that they're safe and not going to have wind turbines near their property may not have the wind turbines, but they may have high tension lines running through to get that power out.
Bonavia, the president of Xcel Energy, he said, if you love wind, you got to like transmission.
They want the wind turbines, and that power right now has no place to go.
When you look at the issues of the cost of construction and siting and access to corridors, is one of those a bigger burden that you see?
The biggest hurdle, of course, is to get access to the corridors. And I think if you can open up those corridors for transmission and for renewables, I see the corridors as being for renewables.
There's not going to be an area that's going to be safe.
These things will probably be obsolete in less than 20 years.
When the wind companies abandon these towers, what are we going to have here?
They'll keep selling these out to different investors. They're going to just eventually, oh, that's not feasible to fix that, shut that one down, and we'll run the ones that are still running.
We're going to have a giant junkyard on Tug Hill, and it's going to be the same way across the state, same way across America.
So somebody's going to have to pick up the pieces, and it'll be the taxpayer.
We've got corporations which are doing what corporations do, make money. The typical citizen, they'll send in their $5 to support wind power, and they feel like they've done their duty to stop global warming. The only way that we can solve the problem we're in is by reduction. We have to reduce what we're using.
If we really put our minds to it as a country and a community, we can make a difference.
I think the answer needs to start here.
I would like to see this town pull itself off the grid.
The community can't afford it. How could the community possibly afford it?
If we have ways of producing electricity, towns could produce electricity for themselves.
The wind companies have financial backers.
To put up one of those turbines, one turbine costs about $3 million. Remember, that $3 million, $1 million comes from the state, $1 million is coming from federal government, $1 million coming from private investors. If you took that $3 million and gave it to the town of Meredith, we could probably take most, if not all, of the town off the grid. We really have to think globally, but start locally.
And oh, they won't come take it down. It'll stand there, and the landowner is going to have to pay the real estate taxes on it. I have baloney. I'm going to climb up to the top of it. I'm going to put a stick of dynamite in there. I'm going to blow the windmill off the top of it, and I'm going to call it a silo, and it's going to be farm tax exempt, and I'm not going to pay any taxes on it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
How can something so good, like the wind, an element, be turned into something kind of bad? It's hard not to be really cynical about it.